the rest of our group, we think that you can call us live now and tell us what you think, or the equivalent of that. Remember, we do not have delayed the 7-second delay. So whatever you say will go out live over the air there. So we just say that we're probably the ones that would get caught with the wrong type of language here. So, but we're not worried. All right. Hey, it's Capt Ron here with FearlessFlight Live for this week. We're really glad to be here. At my age, I'm glad to be anywhere from time to time. And we got our cast of helpers here. Got Diane, fresh off of a trip, and got Dieter coming in from hot and humid Toronto, I understand.
Yep.
And Eric and I have been down in relatively cool Phoenix, right? Only 103 or something like that today. So we're doing good.
6 days coming up where the high will be less than 100, and a couple of them will be less.
Yeah, celebration. So thanks for joining us tonight. This is the place that you come for our for if you have a fear of flying, or if you know somebody who's afraid to fly, or if you just like to hang around with people who are aviation nuts. And not wing nuts, but aviation nuts. And this is the place to be. We have a group beyond our regular Facebook page. If you want to get this every week and you want to get the notice and you have trouble, I guess if you're already here, it doesn't matter. But if you have trouble, if you like our Facebook page, that will automatically give you alerts as to when we're on live. And we're excited about the new format. We're shifting the burden to you. We want you to call in with what you'd like to talk about. We're kind of sick and tired of listening to us, and we want to focus more on what you want. So the Birds of the Feather is yet another place that you can go once you find our Facebook page, and you can log in there, join as a member, and then we click on the approval thing, and usually it's not more than a couple of minutes or so. And once that's done, now you can join the group, be an active member, leave a comment, and start participating in all the good-natured people who are members and have joined before you. We're pushing 800 again. We're going to have to, that means, gang, we're going to have to come up with some kind of new giveaway, okay? And we'll figure it out. So anyway, yeah. So join us and leave a comment there. Tonight's show, a poll question per se. I'm just gonna we'll discuss that in a minute. It's your turn to talk. So there's the number. Take a minute to copy that down if you can. 602-737-3804, and that will bring you live into the group there. And what we may have to have you do is, Eric was just testing it here. What happens, it's kind of, we like to know what your experience is, because Eric's was getting kind of a weird dial tone, this thing. He said it sounds more like a fax call. And so when you get that, don't get discouraged, and you'll eventually go on hold. And when it's your turn to talk, you'll get a voice that says, press *6, and then you'll join the show live with us. Okay. So
and I also just put the number in the Facebook chat. So
excellent.
Use it from there.
Been doing just a truckload of coaching. It's just amazing. You guys are coming out of the woodworks. Keep coming. We don't want to miss any of those things there. Tonight, we're going to talk about what the brain hates a little bit. Diane's going to talk about a trip that she had. We're going to talk about the things that bug you. That's pretty much what every show talks about, at least a little bit, are the triggers and whatnot out there. So the first thing, I'll just start off by talking about what the brain hates. Okay, I listened to another book this week, and it verbalized this, and I thought it's really true. I've talked about uncertainty, I talk about control, and I talked about discomfort, but not in this context. And what they talked about in this book is the three things that the human brain absolutely abhors. Okay, and the first one is the uncertainty. The brain does not like uncertainty. It will do anything to avoid that. And the satisfaction and well-being are largely dependent upon what we can do with those three things there. when you talk about uncertainty, the brain will do anything to eliminate it, including make up its own story. And that's what many of you do. And that's how you start out getting so frightened, is because you're telling yourself things that Eric and I would absolutely say that's not possible in an airplane. All right. And so it generally assumes also when it doesn't know what's going on, it assumes that's a negative thing. And so we're biased in that sense to assume the worst. And that, of course, that doesn't help with your anxiety. And that's one of the reasons that we chose as a fundamental part of the three things that we focus on in Fearless Flight is, number one is educate. So you either educate yourself on your own or through peers, through social connection, or through joining the meetings or coaching calls or things like that, because that's the first thing that has to happen. You need to educate yourself and get rid of a lot of the things that cause uncertainty for you. You can educate yourself about fear of flying and how your brain works. And those are the things that we focus on. And not knowing leads to the next thing the brain doesn't like, which is not being in control. Okay. So the lack of control is a fundamental issue. Whenever I talk to people, anybody about coaching, sooner or later that comes up in the conversation and they say, I think it's about not being in control. That absolutely is. And the brain wants to feel in control of its own destiny. And this is where trust comes in. Imagine, Eric and I, not as much Diane, but you look at the two of our characters here, and it might cause you to worry about trusting your airplane to people. And I was doing a coaching call today, and the person commented on that. When they get on, they don't even really know who's behind the wall up there, who's behind the door. And that's one of the reasons why we encourage you to disclose to the first of all, start through the three things you got to do. You got to tell a gate agent that you got a medical condition so you can get ahead of the line. And then when you come down, you got a little bit of extra time, and you introduce yourself to Diane. Say, hi, my name's Ron. I'm a little bit nervous about flying. And then Diane will check with the folks in the cockpit to see if it's okay if you pop your head in. And then she'll introduce you. And then you get in there and you say, hi, my name's Ron. I'm a little nervous about flying. Anything you can tell me about the flight today, I would appreciate. That's the important thing about that, because you need to make a connection with those people up there to see that they don't want to die any more than you do. And if we can't be in control, then the ultimate thing, the ultimate fix, if you will, for being a fearful flyer is you've got to realize what you can control. And that's where coaching comes in. That's where educating yourself comes in. What are the things over which you have control? You don't have control of what pops into your brain. You have under your control what you do about it and how you respond to it. And the last thing is discomfort. That's throughout our culture, throughout our species. We don't like to be uncomfortable. And in particular, when you're focused in on it. So the brain hates discomfort. It doesn't like not feeling comfortable, even though much of every day or some part of every day we have discomfort. But it seems like when it's being triggered by something related to flying, it becomes particularly uncomfortable for us. There's a saying that I like, and I read another book this week. I got to keep me out of the bookstore there because I'm breaking myself. But it talks about the fact that life begins at the edge of our comfort zone, and I think that's really true. And you're going to hear as a theme tonight when we continue through the show, and hopefully your calls, you're going to hear as a theme that it's not about the airplane. The pain in your brain is not about the plane. It's about what you do with discomfort. And you really have to make a choice sooner or later that you're willing to be just uncomfortable and you're willing to be able to sustain that. And that's where we come in, trying to help you change that story that's going on in your brain. The first step in flying an airplane, we're going to segue just a little bit. Eric and I want to talk a little bit about, do our pilot stuff here. If life begins at the edge of our comfort zone, whenever you check out in an airplane, the first thing you do from the time you get your license or start toward working on your license, all the way up through the rest of your career, if you end up as a career pilot like Eric and I were, you have to learn what the airplane's limitations are. And there's this thing called the flight envelope. Many of you probably use that in general conversation without even knowing what the flight envelope is. And what's the first airplane you flew, Eric?
Oh, I think probably a Cessna 150 and a very 100 horsepower, little 100 horsepower flivver, but great glider, great control feel, trained millions of pilots. And you're right, the first thing you learn are limiting airspeeds, limiting weights, limiting everything, because you don't know anything about flying yet. So they don't want you to go off and attempt something the airplane cannot do.
And that's something we repeat throughout our career. Whenever when I joined the airline, the first thing I had to do is bid and get assigned to one of the airplanes in the fleet. And the very first thing we do in airplane training then is we learn the numbers, we learn the performance, and we go out and we practice flying the airplane around that envelope. If you look on the screen there, if you want to put slide number 10 up, Dieter, these are the things that you get from a flight envelope. So whether it's a big airplane like an airliner or whether it's an airplane like a 150 that Eric first flew, you get a graph like this, and you can see this. And there's all kinds of different parameters you can put to move the graph around a little bit, but you can see that line across the top. This particular across the top, rather, this particular airplane has a ceiling of 41,000 feet. That says that no matter what, no matter who's flying, no matter what, it's not going to get any higher than 41,000 feet. And then if you go to the next slide, Dieter, the next one is the line on the right is how fast can we go? Okay, so that's the limiting speed that you get, and you'll notice how it changes with altitude. Okay, and that's because of the pressure and the density of the air. So it varies with the altitude you go to. And then the next one is how slow can you go?
Wait.
Go ahead, Deirdre.
Might mention why it's important for the pilots to know that we've talked about stall speeds before, which is a part of the envelope where the airplane will not fly. And the airplane can have a high-speed stall as well as a low-speed stall where the air breaks away from the wing and it does not fly. So that's why that high-speed envelope is important. And they're not like a car. You don't floor it and see how fast it would possibly go. The engines easily have enough thrust to push it way past that limiting airspeed. So we're aware of that all the time in the airplane, and it's displayed on our instrumentation what the limiting airspeed is at any altitude that we happen to be flying at. Okay.
Yeah. So these are aerodynamic limits, is what he's saying. It's not performance, and it's not engine or thrust limits. Okay. And then at the other end of the spectrum is how slow can we go? All right. And just to tweak what Eric said, it's not that the airplane doesn't fly below that. It just doesn't fly the way you want it to fly. And it ends up going down because it's going to have to pick up airspeed. So you see this first line here all the way up. Notice it down at sea level, it can go just under 100 knots. And if you go to 40,000 feet, it's going to be the limit. It's going to have to be up around 180 knots or something like that to fly. And then we can go slower. And this brings you to where you notice on takeoff and landing, when we deploy those leading edge and trailing edge devices out in the front of the wing and in the back of the wing, that allows us, if you want to put the next slide up there, Dieter, that allows the airplane to go slower. And the reason we want to do that is so that we can land at the slowest possible speed. So you see that little notch or that little compartment off to the left there. So we can drift down in there as long as we have leading edge and trailing edge devices out there. Okay, and then let's just bring this all back together. So think of yourself as an airplane. You've got a limit, and most of us, because we're not comfortable being uncomfortable, we stay in this little tight focus all the time. And overcoming your fear of flying is as much about being comfortable when you're uncomfortable as it is about anything. So when you go out to get on that airplane, think about what a pilot goes through, what you would go through before you enter into life and before you enter flying. Think about the fact that life does really begin at the edge of your comfort zone, because that's where you know what your limits are. And I went to a military academy, and we never got tired. We never got done, testing ourselves to see what our limits were, because it helps you perform. Dieter, sometime we'll have to have you tell that story about when you went down to Antarctica. Not once, but twice, right?
Yes, and that was our motto. Life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. And amazingly, you can see often as we get older, we tend to have our comfort zone kind of like shrink, and so it's an active process to extend and stay. But I really want to get to Don's question, because it relates to turbulence and the speed and the envelope that you guys were talking about. And he says, wouldn't it be better to slow the plane down during turbulence? And then the follow-up question was just, how slow can they go to make the ride smooth? And I guess in brackets, everybody's wondering, and not stall.
Hey, put slide number, put the one back up there, Dieter, that has the thing. You can put number here. Let's put number 11 back up there. Okay.
So as slow as it can go.
Yeah, as fast as it can go. Okay.
Okay, there.
And Eric, tell them about it. We actually do have a turbulence penetration airspeed. What's that all about?
We do on the high performance airplanes. The manufacturer recognizes that it won't always be nice and smooth, and they have a recommended speed to operate the airplane if it becomes very bumpy, both in Mach index, percent of the speed of sound, and an indicated airspeed. And if it is a very bumpy ride, we'll slow to that speed, and it's not for comfort. It's because it's the manufacturer's recommended speed to do the turbulence penetration. So we'll hit exactly that. And what that will do at altitude is give us, it will, number one, de-stress the airplane from the bumps. It will keep it from taking large shots that are structurally painful, if I could use a word like that, to the airplane. And it will also give stall protection, most importantly, high-speed stall protection and low-speed stall protection, so that if we're really getting moved around, it will ensure that the airplane will remain within the flight envelope and fly well. So we won't slow for the ride. We'll slow for the manufacturer's recommendation to that penetration speed for stall protection, both high and low speed stall protection.
So, and if you look, keep it up one more second, Dieter. If you look at that graph again, all right, when you see that, notice how the curve on the left there slopes all the way up to the right. So as it gets higher in altitude, if you look at the left axis, you've got altitude. It goes up to 45,000 feet. And now across the bottom, you've got knots and true airspeed. Right. Notice it's somewhere down below 100 when you're on the ground or at sea level. And as you go up there, when you get to 40,000 feet or 41,000 feet, it's all the way up to about 180 or 190. So notice how you get higher, the whole thing narrows. The distance between your limiting airspeed, how slow you can go, and how fast you can go gets narrower. And if you went high enough and we're heavy enough, and as my gross weight changes, that complex makes this a little bit more complex as well. But what you can see is you'd like us to slow down to 1 mile an hour. That ain't going to happen. So even though we say there is a turbulence penetration airspeed that does minimize the amount of bumps that you might feel or the intensity of them and the frequency, we just simply can't go as slow as you'd like us to go, as you can see off of that slide.
There's a couple of follow-up questions.
Yeah. Okay, hold it. We want you to use the phone. We want you to come. Some of you chicken hearts out there, and did I say chicken heart? Yes, I did. We want some people calling in on here. We got good money paying for this stupid phone service. So if you're comfortable, go ahead and give us a call. Okay, dear.
Yeah, I'm just putting, while I'm talking, the number up here.
Okay, cool.
So the first one is stall means the engine stops. And let me just the second question. So that was a question. So stall like
Okay.
an engine will stop. And then we got to address how rare or how often do stalls really happen. So those are
Okay,
the
Eric,
questions.
you and me together. Does stall mean the engine stops?
Never,
No,
never.
no.
And I'm glad whoever asked that. And
Yeah.
and that's my fault for not qualifying that. We are only speaking about aerodynamic lift on the wing, not the engine operating. And it's terrible that that's the moniker or the term for it, since you have engines on airplanes. But stalling speeds are speeds at which the wing is no longer producing flying lift, and the airplane will, I love to say it, plummet. The airplane will plummet if you stall it. Then you are going to go down really fast. And it's totally recoverable, and we do it all the time in training. But the wing is no longer flying and will not fly anymore. It has no reference to engine thrust, engine power, engine on or engine off. And I should have a big sign that I hold up anytime we're talking about aerodynamics when I say stall, because we always do that, freak people out. Why would you turn the engines off in flight?
Right. Now, the engines can experience a stall, but it's a different kind. It's the little rotor blades inside there. So the way I would have to do that, I'd have to put a big old piece of plywood across the front of, oops, my airplane disappeared. Have to put a big old piece of plywood across the intake, and which would stop the airflow through the engine. Yeah, the engine's going to cough if you do that. And in essence, that's what ultimately did Sully in there, that and the damage by the birds. If you stuff a whole bunch of Canadian geese in the front of that, it's going to affect the airflow as well. All right, but the stall that we're talking about, aerodynamic stall, by and large, is what Eric talked about with the airplane there. So no,
So
it
then
does
how often does that happen? So Ron, Eric,
Never.
does that ever happen to you?
Never, only in training. We never stall the airplane for our own safety, let alone. We only stall the simulator. That's all we do. And because the simulators have so much fidelity, it will handle just like the airplane. In fact, when you take off, okay, how do we know what takeoff speed? We take whatever we have the weight. You've heard me talk about that before. We know what the performance of the engine is. With that, we can get a speed and where we're going to actually break ground, lift off the runway. And that point is not the minimum safe speed. It's not the stall speed that Eric was referring to. It's 1.3. It's 30% more. So let's say that this airplane would stall at 100 miles an hour. I'll use for comfort. Okay. The takeoff speed is going to be 130. So we're going to have 30 more miles per hour extra when we rotate and lift off the ground. Why? Because if we get airborne and there's a gust of wind and it reduces the airflow a little bit, the headwind we got, the airspeed on the airplane could drop to 125 or something like that. And so that's why we do that. We have a minimum safe speed that we lift off at. Okay. What any others there, Dieter?
Well, I think it was just not worded so well, but basically, Don is asking their backup engine if a stall happens or an engine has a major issue. So I guess it's just going through the procedure, maybe if a stall does happen. So what do you do when an engine, stalls?
What you do is you do what you were practiced in training. All right. And that's why every takeoff is built on the assumption that we will get to the takeoff speed. Before that speed, we're guaranteed that we can stop for any reason in the remaining runway. Okay. But once we get to that speed, now the issue is we can't stop in the remaining runway when we're above that. So when we get to takeoff speed, we have to continue. But every takeoff is predicated on having the thrust from one engine completely go away. And now we're left with accelerating in the remaining runway to takeoff speed. In fact, we're going to be 35 feet above the end of the runway when we depart, because that's the parameters that they build into that. And then we're going to be able to not only take off, but we're going to be able to climb safely to 1,000 feet above the airport and configure ourselves and probably come around and land, because there's no reason, if we're flying from Phoenix to Chicago, there's no reason to continue if we had that kind of a failure in there. How many times, Eric, in a Part 121 in an airliner, have you ever had the engine quit at all, and the engine quit right at our takeoff speed?
Never. And I don't even know a guy whose brother's friend knows a guy who heard that might have happened.
No, it is so rare. The reason we practice it at that point is because it's not dangerous, but because it's critical. It's the most critical time, because we have two problems. We have one with a lesser amount of thrust being provided, and the other one is the airplane, the one side where the engine quit working. Now the other one wants to turn at that direction. So those are the skills that we practice in the simulator as pilots, okay? And it just doesn't happen. I asked over a year, there were 1,700 pilots at the airline I was working for at the time when I taught this recurrent training program. I asked anybody there, and let's just say the average was 10,000 hours. We had some guys in there with 15,000 hours and probably some in there with 8,000 or 9,000 hours. But let's say the average was 10,000 hours. Of 1,700 pilots that year, how many of you have ever lost an engine in an airliner and at that critical speed? Zero. Okay, zero. It just doesn't happen.
It just went from 0 to 1, Ron. We have Michael calling into the show. So let's see if we can get Michael on here. And
put him to the polygraph.
Michael from Prince Frederick, Maryland.
Hey, hi, Michael.
I'm gonna hope that.
Okay, we still got the mute on. Remember that?
Yeah, I asked to unmute, so hopefully he will get that prompt.
You get that *6, and then he'll be up, I hope.
All right, Michael, are you there?
Michael's my husband, but my name is Stephanie.
All right, that's good.
Hi, welcome on the show.
And what was your name?
Stephanie.
Stephanie. Hey, Stephanie, welcome. And don't leave when we get done answering your question here, because we're going to come up with a gift for you. I have no idea what it's going to be, but we're going to do that. So how can we help you?
Oh, well, you all are a gift in and of itself. So I really appreciate you doing this for us all. And I just wanted to say
thank
that
you.
First and
Thanks
foremost.
a lot.
I have my flight coming up August 3rd, and I'm trying to get prepared for it. So my questions are, I wanted to know if you could dispel a couple myths for me. That the first myth is it safer or less turbulent to fly in the morning, as I've been informed many years ago? And is the first 10 minutes of a flight the most dangerous point in the flight?
Okay, Eric, what about flying in the morning?
Well, absolutely. I think that in general, that's correct. You're absolutely correct. The horrible thing is the hour you have to get up and get out of bed to get your junk in the bag and get to the airport in the dark. But if you take all that pain, you're generally rewarded with a smoother ride. Flying at the wee hours of the morning before the sun can heat the earth differentially and start kicking up weather and wind and that kind of thing. So that's absolutely correct.
And wherever you're at, the more heat, the higher the sun, and the more intense the warming during the day, the bumpier it's going to get during the day. So in Phoenix, you might have bumps related to the surface winds. That is, you might have them up to 10 to 15,000 feet in the hottest part of the summer, and at night it only cools to the low 90s and sometimes even hotter than that. But generally speaking, the least amount of turbulence related to the low altitude regime will be in the morning. Now, when you get above that, now you've got other things going on. You've got the jet stream, and you might have convective air later in the day with moisture around that might produce thunderstorms. And even though you're not in the thunderstorm, you may fly around the area that is convective, so you may get the up and down drafts. Now, the last one's one of my favorites, is because everybody has usually read, most fearful flyers, that the most dangerous part of the flight is during takeoff and landing. Well, think about it. That's when you're closest to the ground, so that's when you have the least amount of time. Sometimes, if you had something really critical that you had to make the right decision the first time. But the reality is, I don't use the word dangerous. I use the word, it's the times when you're the most vulnerable. And remember what I said about takeoff. You're accelerating from 0 speed. So if you could have a magic giant that raised the airplane up and let it go, it's going to fall because it needs airflow over the wings to fly. So the more energy we get from the speed of the airplane and the thrust in the engines, literally the safer it becomes on the one hand, because we have the airspeed equates energy equates to safety. Okay. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes.
Yeah. And so Diane, okay,
Yes.
we're going to call you in. Okay. So what would be, okay. So first, Stephanie, you're supposed to fly on August 3rd. That's when you're going.
Yes.
Okay. Have you done a 15-minute coaching call, or do you have the FFK, the Fearless Flight Kit, or anything like that?
I am scheduled to speak with you on August 2nd at 8 p.m.
Okay. Okay. That's great. All right. And is this going to be a 15-minute coaching call?
Yes, I'm not messing around this way. I'm getting prepared and ready to go, and I'm psyching myself up with that phone call with you the night before.
Okay. Is there any chance I could talk you into doing it a little bit earlier than that, less than a night before?
Sure. I picked that time because that's when my anticipatory anxiety is at its worst.
Sure it is.
But I am certainly open and flexible.
So what if I were to give you a free coaching call and you could just count on an hour at least with me, and you could do it whenever you wanted to between now and then?
That'd be great.
Okay, so before you go, make sure that we have your email address or a text. Well, we probably have your texting number there, and you have just won a free coaching call for being the first brave soul to heed our request and show up for us. All right.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's very
You bet.
generous of your time.
You bet. And plus, if you'll find out anyway. But when you get closer, if you get anxious, you're going to call me anyway. All right. We're not going to let you just jump on the airplane, even though you're going downhill with anxiety. But by doing it early, I want to hopefully set the model for people. Half of the calls that I do, people are within a week of flying, and a quarter of the calls that I do, they're within 1 or 2 days. And the problem is you didn't get this way overnight. You had a long-standing practice of hypnotizing yourself by saying, that's not good. I don't like that. Oh my gosh. What about that? Oh, turbulence. What about, I've read that, so that's how we get into those states. So it's not a process where you're going to have some anxiety when you fly. But what you want to do is you want to have tools to limit that anxiety. Okay. And anticipatory anxiety is what causes all the problems. So, okay, Stephanie. So we want to make sure that if you leave us with you can send a text if you would to Dieter or to me and give us your email address. Okay.
Actually, the best way is just simply using the messenger. Just our Facebook messenger, sure. And that way we got you, and either Captain Ron or me will follow up with you. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much again. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Awesome.
So we appreciate you participating. All right.
All right. We do have another caller, actually.
Okay.
Wonderful.
So let me see here. It is an unknown caller, so it's a mystery caller from Pasadena, California. So I'm going to just see if that call will connect.
And
hello.
Hey, who is this?
Mystery caller.
All right.
Hello.
We got you. How are you doing?
Good. This is Oliver, Captain Ron. How you doing?
Yeah.
We would have taken it even if we saw your name, Oliver. You didn't have to.
I don't know. It just came up unknown, I guess.
All
No, I
right.
just
So
wanted to let you
what's
know
up?
I'm
What's
flying.
up with the person who's afraid that everyone will think negatively of him, and he doesn't like to be the center of attention when that goes on. But if somebody has a heart attack at a public event, you'll go right out there, jump, and be absolutely fearless when it comes to treating that person.
Yes, exactly. So next week we're flying to Vegas.
Cool.
My wife and I are gonna fly out of Burbank and fly to Vegas, and that'll be my first flight without you coaching me on the flight in probably over 20 years.
Oh,
So,
that's awesome.
Excited, a
Oliver.
little nervous, but it's gonna come quick, and it'll be a quick flight. So I'll just listen to my harmonizer and go from there, and just get there as quick as I can, and enjoy it, and look forward to getting out there and enjoying some fun and then flying back.
Okay, just leave your wallet at home, and
Yeah.
you'll be successful there. So anyway, hey, thanks for
Exactly.
calling in.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, you guys have a good night.
All right, you too, Oliver.
All right,
Thanks.
Oliver, be careful. The damage won't happen in the air.
All right,
The
thank
damage,
you.
like Ron said, will happen on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, good night, you guys.
All right, take care, Oliver. We got anybody else out there, Dieter?
No, not right now.
Cool. It's a perfect time to whip through the rest of the show there. If you want to go back and put slide number 14, I'm just going to quickly recap, talking about anticipatory anxiety. And here's the problem with anticipatory anxiety. It's way worse than what it's really going to be. All right, which is called, the actual anxiety or the situational anxiety. So what happens is you get this surge of emotion, at least most people do, and it just the faster it grows and the more it grows, the more you feel like it's going to keep going. It's kind of like this lady I had right after 9/11 in the first class we did. We had a ton of people that night, and I had a lady stand up and I said, what's on your mind? And she said, when you take off and you climb, it feels like we're going to keep going all the way to the moon. And I said, if you could do that in an airplane, we wasted a lot of money on the space program. So the anxiety is the same way. It seems like it's never going to stop. But the next slide, if you want, Dieter, a common mistake is that it'll increase to the point where you'll lose control. That is the number one fear of everybody, not just people with claustrophobia. Everybody wonders, to some degree about the airworthiness of the airplane, but they have a bigger question about their own airworthiness. Will they be able to withstand whatever emotions come up for them? And I'm telling you, you will. You won't ever get to that point where you'll, no matter how much you fear a panic attack, it just doesn't show on the outside. It's ugly on the inside is what happens. And then once we increase over time, you get through exposure, you realize that it's not that bad. And if I could put, just the time, look at where the peak of that is. If I said that's the first 15 minutes of your flight, and really for many people, it's more like 5 minutes. So if you can get through the first 15 minutes of that flight, it's really, really much easier. Sure, you might have turbulence. You might get tripped out on occasion, but it's the first 15 minutes where it really loads up on people. And I ask people, let's say you have a 6-hour flight. Are you going to ruin your life for 15 minutes? No. And people don't. What's the most common thing people tell me when they get to the end of their flight and they get off the airplane and they feel exhilarated? It's, I can't believe that I was so worried about it. I can't believe that I didn't do this sooner. And the more you expose yourself, I guess I better put that a different way. The more you go through exposure and expose your anxiety to these forces and all that, the quicker that it fades and the more it gets reduced. And you talk to anybody. If Eric and I could give you all the benefit of our thousands of hours of experience and give you like a reverse lobotomy, give you that experience there, you'd fall asleep like we do on the way to the runway. And not when we're flying, just when we're in the passengers.
I like your part earlier. I'm still thinking about the brain making up stories if it doesn't know the answer, and slap me immediately if I'm ever stupid enough to talk about aerodynamic stalls again without putting the engine qualifier in to start with, because somebody immediately leapt to the conclusion that the engines would be off. If you're a dog person, and the story the brain makes up is, I've never heard anybody's brain make up a good one. They're all bad. If you're a dog person, it's like owning a border collie. And they always say, if you don't have a project for the border collie will think up a project for itself. And you won't like it. It'll never be clean the gutters or re-shingle the roof. The border collie will never do that.
And why do we have border collies? The same reason that we talk and get coaching, the same reason we talk to other people in the birds of a feather group, and the same reason that we talk to each other and disclose our fears, because we produce chemicals, oxytocin. It's the antithesis of cortisol. So when you connect with people, whether it's on this show or whether it's one-to-one with me in a coaching call, or whether it's Eric and Diane working a flight, you get better. Your anxiety gets reduced because of oxytocin. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the questions here. I had one thing I want to share tonight about. I pulled this off of the Facebook group, and I just couldn't resist. This is from Becky, and Becky said, we were flying from St. Louis to Phoenix last Saturday when the bad storm was hitting. Apparently, I was up in Durango, but apparently we had a lot of rain and a lot of storms down here. And she was in a Max 8. Oh, woe is me, right? So you got more things stacked on your mind up there. And she said, we tried landing, but it was way too stormy and rough. So the pilot put her down in Vegas. All right. Went up to Vegas. And so that was one connected thought in their mind. They didn't anticipate that they were not going to land in Phoenix on the first time. So they diverted. And how could they divert? Because they had the fuel and the planning to go with that. All right. So they ended up landing in Vegas. And it says, we tried landing, but it was way too stormy. And when the pilot put her down in Vegas, by that time, Becky was pretty nervous after a very bumpy ride that the pilot, and he put that huge plane down so gently in both Vegas and then again when they took off and landed in Phoenix, that when they finally got to land, he got not a standing ovation, but he got an ovation from everybody in the back and a note to Southwest Airlines from Becky. So that's cool, Becky. Thanks for sharing that story. And she must have, we have to assume that Becky survived that because she left us this story here. So right. Again, the worst thing that's going to happen to you is you're going to end up where you bought a ticket for. All right. Sometime, some way, somehow.
Eventually.
Yeah, there you go. And so I just wanted to emphasize that. And the last thing I want to cover tonight is this is a tribute to this lady. And the question is, if you want to put that slide up there, who's Wally Funk? We should have made that a contest tonight. But Wally Funk, I just got such a kick out of this. This is a woman I had never heard about before last week, I think, when they started talking about who was going to be in the capsule with Jeff Bezos when he made the ride this morning into the suborbital altitudes around the Earth. And this is a woman who I never even had ever heard about the program. They apparently picked 8 women along with the 7 original Mercury astronauts to be astronauts. And then somebody said, hey, you got to be a military person. And in that time, there were no military women in the military who were allowed to fly. So they used that as the reason for excluding her from the program. She was actually destined to be an astronaut, and she never got a chance. So somehow Jeff Bezos got wind of this, and he made her one of the 4 people on that today. This woman is extraordinary. You got to catch a video online to just see. She's 82, and she is so spry, so alert. It's an inspiration, not to mention all the things that she's done with her life. And she's been a pilot since she was, I think, about 9 years old. She got her license at the age of 17 or so, and she'd been flying her entire life, and she's just a joy to listen to. And you talk about positive vibes. If that can't get you out of the doldrums, nothing can. So I wanted to
add that she beat all the guys for that were preparing way back whenever she was slotted to prepare for the mission, and she never got the chance, but she actually had the highest scores in pretty much every category. So
here's one anecdote to support Dieter that I read that. So they had this thing, they immerse the astronauts to simulate weightlessness and isolation. They put them in a tank with a spacesuit on and all that. And most of the guys would go crazy after a certain amount of time. They had a time limitation. She was in there, at one point it had been so long and they were worried that something had happened to her, and she fell asleep. Nobody else fell asleep in that tank. They were unfortunately alone with their own thoughts, and that can be your worst enemy sometimes. I just thought that was incredible. And they sprayed ice water into her ears during that time as well to initiate vertigo. And so I don't know, maybe there's that, maybe if you blow hot air in some of your ears that out there that get vertigo, maybe that's the antithesis of that. But anyway, she's just a remarkable character. And I wanted to share that with everybody out there.
He
So
doesn't look 82, and somebody should have checked her ID.
Yeah.
I'm just extrapolating that out to if the TSA has to start checking IDs and tickets for space flights. What a pain.
yeah, there you go. There you go. So thanks for joining us tonight. This has been special, even though we did the call in before. We did this one on purpose, and it wasn't flawless, but it worked better than we anticipated. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate your participation, support every week and on the website. Keep coming back. It's the best way to, and the most painless way to get through this. And with that, we'll say happy landings from me and the rest of the gang there, and have a great week. Okay. And get, blue skies and happy landings. Bye-bye, everybody.
See you guys.
Bye. Have a good night, everybody.